Get underway. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Just to let you know again who I am, you all look like familiar names and faces, but I'm Jason Anderson. I'm your Visual and Performing Arts Content Specialist at the Maine Department of Education, and it's my pleasure to be with you this afternoon and to have your colleague, your famed colleague, Suzanne Goulet, presenting today on cross-content collaboration, and as she likes to put it, thinking outside the new box, which is really kind of an awesome concept, and I think we're all getting used to what this new box is. I don't think we've figured out yet, Suzanne, how many sides this new box has.
No.
You know, whether it's a square or some other type of geometric shape, but we are going to get to exploring it here. So Suzanne's going to talk to you a little bit about her thoughts on cross-content collaboration and thinking outside this new box that we have. And as always, I just want to encourage you, if you want to put questions, comments, thoughts, whatever in the chat box while Suzanne is doing her presentation or while other people are speaking, then we can get to questions and comments in the end. And hopefully we'll have an opportunity to open up the floor for some discussion as well. As always, there's a form at the end that I'll put in the chat box that you can access to get a professional development certificate for your time today. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Suzanne.
Howdy, welcome everybody. For myself, my school responsibilities ended last week. I know some of you may not be in that same case, so hang in there. For us, we had a vote district-wide, and we voted to work through April break. And at the time, it sounded awesome, and then the week after, we were like, "Oh, what did we do?" But now that this weird year is behind us, it's great to be able to move forward like this. So thank you and welcome. I'm going to share my screen here. And so thinking outside the new box, and this is a conversation that I remember starting to have with people, just how crazy everything was when we were all trying to sort it out. Nobody knew where the virus was. And what I want to propose to you is some ideas for next year, specifically next year to start. And if it moves beyond that, that would be great. And part of this is in response to, I've been hearing lots of conversations about some districts that are suspending what they call the fine arts next year, about how some colleagues who are like, well, we can't do anything, we won't. And so what I want to urge everybody is to really think about how needed and urgent you are in the lives of our students. There are some of my students that I was connecting with during this event, and they were just talking about how they were sick and tired of Khan Academy. It was just, so starting off with the olden days, way back in March, when we had, remember this toy from maybe your childhood where everything fit? And I even, as my nieces came into this world and these showed up at my sister's houses, I still played with them. And there were different ways to play with them and try different things. But man, then there was this slime came in, and everything just was different. So maybe you felt like this. I know there were parts of me that did, for different reasons. And one of those reasons was also that I'm in a school that is not a one-to-one school, and not all my students had internet access at home or the technology they needed to do it. And that included myself. I had many a meeting in the parking lot of the high school, because we were not allowed in, or the parking lot of my town office. And it made me a more empathetic educator to understand that you can't just do it the same, and you can't do it the same for everybody, because we were in different levels. So this is essentially, right, what a lot of people felt like. We're still trying to figure out how to do what we normally did. And if you ever had a chance to participate in any of the MAEA or any of the other presentations that Jason was a part of, it was about amazing things, learning about how people adapted to create amazing opportunities for our students. So not just our content knowledge, but also the social emotional learning that we all needed. So, but once again, there was still that slime again. And I started looking at that slime and I started thinking it was pretty cool. And it reminded me of a few things, right? So here we go, we got Matisse. So Matisse, organic slime. This is the knife thrower in the French, la lacune de couture, from jazz. And jazz, so this started connecting to other content areas. So we're looking at our music colleagues, you know, that improvisational jazz. What do we got? Where are we going? We don't know. And what can we do with it? So yeah, there's slime. I don't know if you've ever made any at home, but it is something that it definitely something to play with. So I want to, my goal is to help students, and I want to make it easier for them and easier for myself and easier for my colleagues. And for me, it was collaborate. So in collaborating, I would like to give you a couple of suggestions for you to consider. There is, you can't collaborate with everybody during this event because there's still some people that are still really freaked out. But what I suggest maybe that you consider doing is making a connection with a colleague that you have a good relationship with, or maybe someone you want to get to know better. This doesn't have to be a collaboration that happens the entire year. This can be something that starts something, because we want to make sure that you have success. So how can you make this work for all? How can we work together to help our colleagues not have to feel like they have to do Khan Academy all the time? And how can we adapt to help our learners achieve a deeper understanding in not only our content area, but maybe working together help develop a deeper understanding in both content areas, or 3 content areas, or 4, depending on how you want to put this together. So it's not just yourself, it's not just your learner, it's also the other educator as well. And that's where the gold star comes in. We want to keep it simple. When we were first bringing in backwards design, one of the things McTighe talks about is, you know, keep it simple, go for the win. Make it simple. So I've been fortunate to be a part. It was actually right in the middle of all. It started before this. It's a national program called the Innovation Collaborative, and it is focusing particularly on STEAM and understanding that STEAM, it could also be streams, the R for writing, science, technology, engineering, arts, math, and the social studies of the history. And understanding that when you are collaborating, there is going to be a continuum. It's going to be like any relationship that you've ever been a part of, where there's going to be a little growing this way, a little growing that way, and things are going to move back and forth. And so you have 3 different levels on the continuum, and I'm looking to move my mouse and my mouse doesn't show up. So looking on the continuum, on the lower left-hand side, you've got multidisciplinary. So you've got your both content, you've got whatever content areas working side by side, and they're kind of supporting possibly a theme. And then interdisciplinary, where they are coming together, there are elements of both that are used to support each other. But transdisciplinary is when all content areas involved are working together to elevate the learning, to go deeper. There's concepts that are defined between both of them. and you find out what you share together, and you are truly working together. There are, one of the things that I love to see in transdisciplinary work when I watch documentaries are those engineering documentaries where it's all kinds of different teams working on different components of something that they're trying to develop. And then eventually they all come together, but they still had that common language. Okay, so what can we bring? What can the arts bring to this? So in thinking about how you could work collaboratively with your colleagues, and they're like, well, you know, what are you going to bring to us? What is it that we can do? And particularly where we don't know what the fall's going to bring us, there's three options, right? There's the one where we all go back to school and it's like back to March again. Well, we pretty much know that's probably not going to be the case. So there's going to be some kind of hybrid. So some students, some of the time, some teachers in, some teachers out. What is it going to be like? And so what are those essential parts that we do that we can focus on, that we can bring to students and to our colleagues? And many of these here you're all familiar with. Observing and evaluating, persisting, creating, the studio habits of mind come in. And I'm not familiar if music has the same equivalent of studio habits of mind, but I would believe that there's an equivalent, if not an adaptation.
Yeah, and I know, Suzanne, I used in my graduate work, I studied the regular habits of mind that are universal for everything. And I, as part of my graduate project work, I adapted that and started to work on adapting that into a music framework. So yeah, I think you can beg, borrow, and steal from studio habits and the universal habits of mind. And there's just so much that we do as arts teachers already that already, you know, fit into those categories.
And I love how also, I think some schools have adapted acronyms for them. I think it's called HOWL down in one school in the southern part of the state for the habits of work and learning. So how am I starting? So coming back to recognizing that I knew from talking with students that they were not only freaked out about everything, the social situation and the virus situation, but also just the amount of work that some of our colleagues had assigned them, because they were trying to fit that same square peg into the same square hole, except they didn't have a square peg anymore. It was now slime. And they were still trying to make it fit. So I started thinking also about how I would start the year. I mean, I knew we did have the benefit, most of us, of having started the year with our students, developing relationships with them, establishing procedures, expectations. There were some schools that were on trimesters that I believe had just gotten into, met their new students like 1 week or 2 weeks in. So this is about starting next year. We're starting a class with students with the expectation that we don't know who they are. Yes, we may have some, those of you who are high school teachers or you teach multiple levels in the same school, you may have a good understanding of who you're going to have. You may know a few students. But we're starting from scratch, you know, and without the benefit of instructing them even on like protocols and procedures and introductions. And in my case, we're still working on the technology, the technology part. There was, statistics wise, I went through one class. Over one half of the class either did not have adequate internet access to be able to handle video, or the technology to do the same, because there were shared circumstances where the household now had to share one device. The broadband, the bandwidth was not enough. They did give me one of those hotspots, and it was good enough for me to open an email, and then everything would shut down. So I could never respond to an email. I definitely couldn't do video. but they were nice enough to give me a map of where I could go in the next town 16 miles away to access it. So that was they're like, problem solved. So how could I do this? So as a visual arts teacher, let's bring it back to observations, sketchbooks, visual note taking, uh, color coding, illustrating, observing, nature journaling, sketchbook journaling. If you haven't had a chance to look at what's on the internet with sketchbook journaling, there's because sometimes using the word journaling with high school students, the students who have a fear of writing, kind of like they get all puckered and all balled up. So if you can work out sketchbook journaling or nature journaling, then like, oh, okay, we can get into this. And so I approached two of my colleagues, two science teachers, about incorporating this. One's a physical science teacher and one's a biology teacher. And I know that they were struggling to try to figure out how they were going to fit things in. And so I proposed to them working in sketchbook journaling. I served on the one of our nutrition buses with a math colleague, and that's where I learned about Khan Academy. And so I do a lot with Tinkercad and 3D printing and digital design. And I know that we can make those shapes, that slime, fit into his applied geometry class. And not only to just help them to a deeper understanding, but also to make it more authentic, to it not just be watching videos, an opportunity for them to create. And I'll talk through in another slide, I believe, like how we're talking about this is going to fit. So one of the other things, thinking about other arts content areas, is thinking about kinetic sculptures. So it could be musical, it could be strictly visual. One of the physical science teacher is developing a new unit on all the hydropower components here just in the Waterville area. So, we do live in Waterville. So what if we could create some hydro-powered kinetic opportunities, and using the 3D printer, it could be, depending on the class, they could actually be designing the water wheels, or we print those and provide those, and then they're creating the artwork that will move in response to how the wheel is utilized in one of the various water sources that we have here. And how that all works, we're still working out, but we're still thinking about those big ideas. And is it possible that it could have a real world solution for something? So people who have problems with geese who always land on their docks, and can we create some aesthetic pieces that will help to keep birds out of their gardens or off their floating rafts? Animating key concepts, coming back down to illustrating, and photography. I mean, this is not everybody, and always recognizing that not all our students have access to all technology, but many of our students have access to the ability to be able to capture an image. And hopefully, my dream is that the device that they do end up giving all students is activated with a camera, and so students will be able to also capture images. So I'm only going to work with one section with each educator, and we're going to target the students that we share. So it's going to be voluntary. The students are going to be given the opportunity to either have 2 classes that they have to meet requirements for, or in one class have the collaboration of working on both content areas. So this way here, the students don't have to do two separate things. We'll work out collaborations. We'll look at, we'll work together. We have some ideas to start off the year, but we know that this is basically just being out in front of the students as we move through. We're also going to give the students that are in the class who are not in one of my classes the opportunity to be a part of this as well. Now, the benefit of having students in the class who are doing this and some who are not is we'll have a control group inside the same class. So students who are using arts concepts to help to move towards deeper understanding, when we move to the summative assessments, it'll be interesting to see how those students in each of the groups perform and demonstrate. So right now we're looking at physical science, biology, and each of these are what we call at Waterville High School the applied levels. So physical science, biology, and geometry. And the Latin instructor has recently reached out to me, and we've started talking about constellations. And so this is also an opportunity where we might also be, we're just started just talking about this, reaching out to our health and phys ed teacher, so that this is about an opportunity where we could get students outside. And it might mean, you know, a hike up to Colby Hill. So there's a lot of opportunities in here. So other arts content ideas. So adapting songs and lyrics for understanding. If Beyonce has a song, Girls Rule the World. So what if there was a song that was adapted, Viruses Rule the World? And how is it that viruses rule the world? And what is it that they do? And dance movements to illustrate key concepts. A lot of these are going to be ideas that you have heard before. Creating new instruments, and there's the 3 of the Blue Men. By the way, when I in my classes, when we talk about careers in the arts, if you have ever gone and you've looked at the application to become a Blue Man, one of the requirements is you have to have eye sparkle. So you have to have good eye sparkle. So I'm here just to, this is a pep talk for you to embrace the slime. It's here. It's not going anywhere. Going back to March, it's gonna be very strange when we reach that 1-year anniversary, right? And I don't know about for you, but Friday the 13th, right, was the last time I met face to face with my students. And it'll be interesting to see what we've done, how far we've come, but there's a lot of slime out there, and it's, you know, it's not just the virus. We've got a lot of stuff going on, and there's amazing things that can be done through this. So my encouragement to you is to embrace the slime. And I went the wrong way here. And the whole idea is about working smarter, not harder, and considering those cross-content collaborations to support deeper understanding. So this was, I do have, as part of the innovation collaborative, I do have materials, I do have, there are some basic lesson plans. There's a few that they had incorporating, there was the kinetic sculpture, incorporating ceramics in a cell, in understanding cell design. And the point where we moved from face-to-face to remote learning for myself is when we were going to be implementing a lesson that they had designed and then designing our own lessons. And because I did not have a class to work with, because my students were not all connected, I didn't participate in that yet. But I have those materials, and I'm going to be working towards those. So we're finding ways to make it all work. But I have lots to share, and people that I can connect you with but just this is a pep talk about that we can do it, and we have so much to offer to our school and our kids and our colleagues. And so if you can take an opportunity to make this connection, you might be developing an advocate for yourself, because this year for most of us are going to be okay. It's going to be financially, budget wise, it's going to be in the years following. And that's it for the presentation part, and open for comments and questions. And
That's awesome, Suzanne. Thank you for putting those slides together to share with us. And right, so we need you, what you just ended with is this idea that in a lot of ways we need to strike while the iron's hot as arts educators, because again, next year we're probably going to be okay. It's going to be how do we incorporate ourselves in future years and future iterations of what education is going to become and evolve into in Maine. That's going to make the big difference. I want to ask a question of the group, and this isn't meant to be an incendiary question, but I think it could be really interesting to see what people's thoughts are on it. In watching Suzanne's presentation, I was struck with two big thoughts, and I think it's like the yin and the yang a little bit of how you think about something like cross-content collaboration. You have the age-old question of how do we do it, and that can be, you can frame that in any number of ways. You know, how do we maintain fidelity within content areas as we do it fairly? How do we do it in terms of scheduling? But then there's the question of why do we do it? And we hope that the why drives our work on it and not the how. But in terms of any of your own situations, any of you in your schools, so we can kind of open up the floor a little bit to discussion on this. Which question do you see as being the bigger hurdle to get over with you and your colleagues in your building or in your district? Is it the how do we do it, or the why do we do it? And you can think about that for a minute if you want. And maybe Suzanne, since you're our guest presenter today, maybe you've thought a bit about that with your own staff and how you might, which question might be the bigger hurdle to get over.
well, for myself, it's both. It depends. It depends on. So it's that continuum.
Mm-hmm.
It depends on who it is. So for one colleague at the beginning of this, the colleague was like, "That's it, we're done." And I was like, "Oh, no, no, no! Wait, there are all these things that we can do." And then, um, and then I'm like, "Oh yeah, yeah." And and there are some people that I like, wow, like, what did you must have had an awesome time during this this event, like not doing anything. And I'm like, are you see it? Well, let me tell you some of the things that I did, and and here's
How
my
much time do you
log,
have?
and here's all these things, and it was just uh but that part of that was not having a vehicle. We had one faculty meeting during the entire um except for at the end. We had one at the beginning, we had one like 2 weeks before the end, and then we had a couple at the end because we were trying to plan out graduation as well. But it's different. It's going to be different for everyone. And the idea is that, I don't know, I guess have your elevator pitch ready. So when people think that you're not doing it, you can say, these are the things. And then hopefully these are also learning opportunities where you'll be presenting, students will have learning evidence that you will be able to demonstrate and show.
Awesome. How about anybody else? What do you think? The how do we do it versus the why do we do it? And Heidi, you chimed in. You had a little fun quip there on the chat about having Suzanne come talk to your staff. So I see maybe there's some hurdles there that we may want to try to work out here a little bit in this group. Anybody else want to tackle the how do we do it versus the why do we do it, or what the balance is? Maybe how you combat one over the other, try to get boost buy-in.
it's gonna it's gonna be hard. I mean, we know it. What trying to do what many of us have done for a long time was hard, right? And so we need to embrace it, and we need to be sensitive also that this is not only are we trying to do that, but there are some of our colleagues who are at home with their own kids, with their own kids trying to continue their education. So it is just it's going to be hard, but keep it simple, and that's why I'm starting off with observing, um, observing what you working with sketchbook journals and just helping students meet the requirements in my class through also through another class as well, just to take some pressure off of them.
Suzanne, you also encouraged people to find somebody that you're kind of like minds or somebody that's wanting to do it. My master's is actually in integrative education, and I'm at the elementary level now. And you would think, wow, that would be, it's perfect. But I really find that people have been trained to think, narrower and narrower as opposed to how the connections really are there. And that has been my experience, that if you can find somebody who gets it, who thinks that way, then it's a lot easier. But a lot of people just don't understand that whole idea of connection, that, there is a continuum. And I think that's so important.
It may be, but this may be the time. The 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 buy-in might be how this can help them
Mm.
with their load. I mean, there are people, educators who jumped into this. There were just some people. It was amazing what they did. I don't know how they did it, but it was overwhelming, and the students felt the same way. And part of it was also there was a social emotional component as well. This was trauma, but we still had some people working through that. I mean, this is definitely something that's going to need to be addressed more, at least at our building level and our district level,
Yeah,
come the fall.
and I mean the again, we have this really unique opportunity, this perfect storm, that the system has been shocked to a point that we now can really think about going, we can realistically think about going in a new direction with interdisciplinary learning and project-based learning and cross-content collaboration that before has been a novelty at best for a lot of people, and or a trend or a fad, like, oh, so they brought in someone to come speak at the first PD of the year or the opening session for the year, and it was all about working with your colleagues, and then they never followed up with it, and we just went about our merry way, right? And so, I mean, we've all experienced that regardless of what the initiative was. But like, the system got such a jolt last March, and since then, that we're sort of like, we've got this one-time opportunity maybe to really get shifted and going in another direction. And Sarah and Rachel and Melanie all bring up good points in the chat in terms of like getting people to remember that when we live in our world, we do not think about our world in a siloed manner. So, if I'm doing home improvements around my house and I'm trying to think about measurement, and I'm trying to think about trigonometry, and I'm trying to think about things like that, I don't think about it through exclusively a math lens. I'm looking at it from the aesthetic value, and I'm saying, well, maybe this angle would look a little bit better, or this would function, this would support this, or this would. So trying to convince people to understand or remember that we don't think about our world in silos. We think about our world interconnected. And so it's really it's almost easier to do it that way because we all do that naturally as adults, and trying to teach our kids to do that instead of trying to stick with a way where we're we're saying this time is for math, and this time is for social studies, and this time is for science, and this time is for arts. It's like, if we can start to break down those walls a little bit and meld things together, I just think that the opportunity for deeper learning is going to be so much better and so much heightened for students, that they're going to leave school, they're going to graduate, and they're going to feel like they can think about the world like a normal person, you know?
And that it also, in designing these parts, that the goal is to be flexible. So the goal is, okay, so if option one, we are all here, we can still do this. You know, likely not, but any one of the hybrid models, we can still do that. Or, you know, we might start, we're here, but we know that there's going to be times when for 2 weeks, everybody goes home because the virus popped up somewhere and everybody needs to go home for 2, ding, 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 you know, the bell rings, everyone to their corners. And so the idea is that they can still continue. They can continue on. And so it was finding a model, trying to develop a model that can continue.
Are you
regardless of where they are. Oh, sorry.
Talking about a scheduling model? Is that specifically what you're referring to?
So those models.
That's the most difficult thing. I've been trying to find things for that for years in terms of research and what are different. They have mini courses and there are a lot of different things out there. But I'm just thinking about my own specific guidance department, and to get them, they're in stone. They're stone people. There's no moving. You just set them on the ground and they stay there. There's no, what if we got an afternoon where we could open it up, and instead of having the 90-minute classes, we had twice a week we had 3-hour classes twice. The arts would love that, right? And their eyes glaze over. It's like you've struck them with a tire iron or something.
I was gonna say, you've hit them on the back of the head with something. Yeah, Charlie, I get that. Yeah.
And I can't understand why. I'm not a math teacher, but damn it, I know there are mathematical logarithms that would let stuff like that happen. And sometimes it's the math teachers that crawl into the hole. Making even the proficiency base, trying to make a numerical analogy between a 4-point scale and a 100-point scale. Well, if colleges have been doing it for how many hundreds of years? And I just said, well, 60 is 0, 70 is 1, 80 is 2, 90 is 3, and 100 is 4. And nobody it was like I was talking to a wall. And now in Google Classroom, you don't have the option for a 4-point scale, but you can use a 100-point scale and you can make those numbers fit and translate it. But again, I don't know, Suzanne. I'd love to see a plan. Any one school that could break the mold and maybe make a model that people could use. I don't know.
I love that. I love that point that you made, Charlie, because I have a friend that's the fine arts chair at the Dartmouth campus of the UMass system. And I remember back when I was in the classroom, we had this idea of, well, how are we going to have, how are colleges going to be able to look at a different system if we create our own system, whatever. And I just reached out to him and I said, how many different students or how many different countries do your students come from on campus? And he said over 100 countries. He said our admissions department read transcripts that don't look even remotely like anything that we've ever seen before. He said, and they figure it out. You just do it. You just figure it out, and you make the best choices that you can, and you go from there. But Charlie, you raise a really good point, and I hope that we're getting out of a mindset that schools that really throw caution to the wind, and I even hate describing it that way, but they just say, we're going to start fresh. And we're gonna do something that maybe doesn't look like anything else anybody's doing, and we have no control group with it, and but we're gonna try it because we think it'll work. I hope that we're getting to a point where we're not going to look at those schools as being anomalies or weird schools or alternative schools or any of these other labels. I'm just hoping that we start to figure out what's best for the kids in our communities, and then we do that. We go there.
Well, there was so in listening to some of the things that happened across the state with this, so there were some schools that had students sitting in their chair for the same exact school schedule that they had all day, every day. And so this was also one of the motivations and reaching out to colleagues, so that if we could find a way to not have students have to do that. So in one way, it is looking at the scheduling and knowing and not knowing what it was. We've actually have been told not to plan yet for the fall because they don't know what it's going to look like. So instead of being like, but this is also the same school that still gave students grades, because the kids are going to need it for college. Meanwhile, we'd been hearing colleges are doing pass fail, or giving them the option to do that. I mean, there's a lot of toys out there that people have been playing with for a long time, and they don't want to give them up. They don't want to play with the slime.
And I will tell you another very real hitch in the system here that we have right now is the degree of accountability that schools have for math and ELA scores to the state and how that connects to funding. And I will tell you that is on the mind of the commissioner and her team. It has been for several months. And with this shifting paradigm that we have now of education in Maine, I would be very encouraged to know or think that they are thinking about that and how that's going to, how that may change or evolve to free up the thinking of building administrators. Because if you put yourself in building administrator shoes, they have marks that they need to hit. And so if you start thinking crazy about scheduling and cross content collaboration and not having dedicated math periods or ELA periods, but you're thinking about mixing things together, you put yourself in a real opportunity, maybe for jeopardy in that, in the sense that your students may not get the targeted math that they need in order to show progress toward meeting benchmarks or whatnot. So when we can kind of get rid of those hurdles, I see the landscape opening up a lot more for people. But that's a very real hiccup in the whole system right now, and that ends up, I mean, we know 9 times out of 10 that ends up driving our scheduling in buildings.
Well, and also for the tech centers also.
And that too.
And also music programs that have itinerant teachers.
But what an awesome opportunity for tech centers and schools and art and itinerant arts teachers to like what more reason do you need to break the mold and do that,
Well, you mentioned, Jason, the whole interdisciplinary piece, the two classes, and that's the basis of Suzanne's presentation. But and yet there's this attitude of, well, how can they get 2 standards at once? I mean, 2 sets of standards at once. I mean, if you take one class, it doesn't have to be English or social studies or art, and it's almost like there's this pushback against the concept of and this is a terrible analogy, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. In other words, you spend 90 minutes in a class and you're doing both social studies and art. You can't get social studies and both credits for art and social studies because it shouldn't be about seat time.
Right. It's about the value of the experience for the students.
And the evidence they can produce. If a social studies and art teacher can have a student show, and I know, I mean, we all have students that would blow something like that out of the water. They just would. They'd put it all together and it would be awesome. And they say, look at this. Look what I've learned because you've let me get out of that brick and mortar box that I'm in, and let open the world out and walk down to the ocean or walk up the mountain or whatever and experience a bunch of different things simultaneously.
So I'm reminded, I think it was probably 6 or 7 years ago, when I was still in the classroom, I decided that I wanted to offer a history of rock and pop music, or a history of American music class. And it was during one of those times when the Dog and Pony Show had rolled through town, and they said, oh, interdisciplinary and cross content, they were the words of the year, right? So I went and talked to a social studies colleague of mine, and I said, because I know he loves music, and I said, hey, would you like to design this class with me, and we could team teach it? And they were, at the time, they were pushing team teaching too. And he said, yeah, that sounds awesome. So we spent a whole month like batting ideas around and laying out a curriculum, and we did all the writing, we did everything, and we submitted it, and it came back and said, this is a great idea, but you're not going to be able to team teach it. And we said, well, why not? That's like the whole point of the whole thing, was you were encouraging people to look at team teaching opportunities. They said, well, if you do that, then that's going to lose a social studies block that we need to put students in. And we just looked at them and we said, you literally just missed the whole point of what we did. So I just ended up teaching the class anyway, because there was interest from the student body, and it was really remarkable. I never failed. Every semester I taught it, I had at least 1 or 2 or 3 students that would say, we're talking about this in US history, and this is just wow, like I didn't understand that took place, at the same time as Woodstock, or that, the Vietnam War had this impact on arts and on self-expression and culture and all this other. And I would just say, yeah, there you go, that's it. They were like, why? And it ended up evolving out of the, why are we learning about US history in music class, and more about like, oh, I understand this better because I heard about it in social studies. So my social studies colleague that ended up having to stay in his classroom, he ended up throwing things in anyway that he knew I was covering in my curriculum, and so we kind of did it anyway, even though we didn't do it in the traditional sense. But it really is about trying to find those opportunities for students to be able to demonstrate these connections that we do all the time, and we just don't even think about the fact that we do them. Awesome. I feel like I've monopolized some of the conversation here. I didn't mean to, but I think we've had good conversations overall. Anyone else have anything else they want to throw out in terms of a way of thinking about this, or a path forward, or maybe you're still wondering like how to initiate that conversation with a colleague? I'm looking at the chat too for anybody who wants to type things in.
I'll be looking forward toward the end of this. I've got to get back to my faculty meeting. I don't want to miss the whole thing. They're probably all talking about me. So.
Right, or nominating you to do stuff.
Yeah,
exactly,
Charlie,
exactly.
Charlie, you run to that, and I'll send you by email the form with the PD certificate so that you can get that later. Yep.
Okie doke. Thanks a lot.
Absolutely.
Bye, guys. Good to see you.
Take care, Charlie. Good to see you too.
The case goes.
In fact, let me. Like that, Heidi says you've been nominated for 2 new committees. All right, let me put that in the chat box right now before I forget. The form for you to fill out for your certificate. Let's see, copy.
Hey, Jason, this would also be, if we could get this, a recording of this, I'd like to share this with my colleagues.
Absolutely. Sarah, this is going to be eventually over the next day or 2 or 3. Sometimes they are a lot that get dumped in at one time, and they don't all get uploaded except, over the next couple days. But if you go to YouTube and you look for the main DOE's channel, which is main DOE.com, I'll put it in the chat box for everybody.
I also put my email in the chat box. At first, I emailed only Melanie privately. But I did put it in for everyone. If you don't have it, I'm not saying I have all the answers, but I will tell you that I am really excited about trying to find the answers to this, or actually, I'm really looking forward to figuring out the questions. There's,
Oh, absolutely.
and that's part of also what I try to help guide my students towards too. And so my email's in there. Anybody wants to go any further with this or share what you've been doing, and I know Jason's going to continue through the summer with, with helping us to set up for success for the fall.
Do the best I can. And, I just think, Suzanne, the thing that everyone has to keep framed in their mind is it's about little wins. So maybe it's just a lesson that you do with a colleague, and it takes you 20 minutes to come up with a lesson that incorporates standards from 2 different content areas. And then you build that lesson out into maybe a series of 3 lessons. And then before you know it, you have a unit. And then before you know it, you have a whole, it's about those little steps that you're willing to take, and you have to be willing. In a lot of ways, you have to be willing to fall on your face and trial run things. But that's the great art of education, I think. There's a science part of it and there's an art part of it. And I love the art part where we're experimental and we try things, and that's okay. It's okay to succeed in some things and fail in others, and you get back up on and you go again. I put in the chat box the link to the form, so you should be able to click on that. Once you submit that form, it will give you a link in the response that you can click on. You can put your name, and then you'll get your certificate for this session. I also put the DOE's YouTube channel name on there, so if you go to youtube.com and you search for Maine DOE Com, and then you can bookmark that channel. Or subscribe, I think is what YouTube says. You can subscribe to that channel. That's where all the PD videos for all the content areas end up. So I encourage you to go looking around for some other things too. There may be some of my other content specialist colleagues that have done some sessions that might be of real cool interest to you.
In many ways, I think this period is like a perfect paradigm shift. It's like so many things have been turned on their head that now's the time to do just what we're talking about. And it may be that it'll continue on. I'm hopeful.
Well, and we at least have the platform, Sarah, to say, why not?
Yeah.
All this time, there have always been reasons why not to do it. And now with, like you said, the whole thing's been scrambled. So why not? Let's try something else.
Yeah.
So I think that's good. I think it's encouraging for us. And arts people, we have a way of thinking that some of our colleagues don't think that way. So we bring that special bit to the table. And Suzanne, I'm happy that you were able to highlight that in your presentation about how we think about things differently and that we have that advantage. And that's why I think maybe some people can't get over the hurdle of even starting this, because they just don't really know how to start thinking about it. Where, we have it's multi-dimensional thinking. It's like what Charlie was alluding to. How some people think, how on earth can you do math standards and visual arts standards at the same time? Well, you have to think 3-dimensionally on it. You can't think, you can't think of it as being flat or linear, right? It can't be linear. It's got to have dimension to it. So anyway, cool conversations today, everybody. I really, really appreciate your time. I hope that you're able to get some fire going in you for some of this stuff. Thanks again, Suzanne, for getting our fire started on that. That's super cool. And Suzanne, if you're willing to share your slides, if you want to, everybody, if you want to take just a second to put your preferred email address in the chat box. If Suzanne shares the slides with me, I'll forward that all on to you so that you can have those as a reference point. That'd be really cool. A lot of you, I feel like I email you like a million times a day anyway, so I apologize ahead of time for that, but I'll try to be more pointed on it. And also, if you didn't open the form yet that was in the chat box, if you want to save the chat box, remember, if you go down where you type a chat message, click on the 3 little dots and then select Save Chat. That will save it as a text file right to your computer so that you can access it later. Thanks again to Suzanne for presenting today. Greatly appreciate it. I know that a lot of you are are gearing up for some break, and then others of you are gearing up to work on the Continuity of Learning for Maine initiative, which is super exciting, and we're doing just this kind of work, which is really awesome, starting to look at interdisciplinary collaboration. So that's really awesome, very cool. I want to look at my calendar just a second, and I'll send out a reminder for this. Why can't I see my calendar right now? We have a cool presentation coming up on social emotional learning and the arts. And that is going to be presented by Dr. Maurice Elias, who is from Rutgers University. And that's going to be a week from today at 2 p.m. So that's going to be on Tuesday, the 23rd at 2 p.m. And I will put the link to register for that in the chat box before we leave, because I've got another minute and I never miss an opportunity to try to put information out there for you. So if you'd like to register for this session, I'm going to drop the link in the chat box right now for you. And then feel free to click on that to open it up right now if you want. It'll open up another window in your browser, and then you can register for that. Again, that's going to be a week from today at 2. And with that, we've reached the end of our hour. So again, I want to thank you all for being here. Feel free to reach out to Suzanne or me or anyone else in the conversation if you want to throw some ideas around about cross-content collaboration. And I wish you all a fine rest of your afternoon. Take care, everybody. See you soon.